episode number 614, Otis Meets Gomer. Two Chairs No Waiting is brought to you each week by the good folks over at WeaversDepartmentStore.com. Drop by over at Weavers and pick up some of the great Mayberry items they have over there. They got a barbershop hairstyle print, just like at Floyd's Barbershop. Definitely something you might want in your collection. Head over and check it out. And while you're there, check out all the neat stuff, as Weavers is the official online store for the Loaded Goat in Mount Airy, North Carolina. They got some great t-shirts, great logo at the Loaded Goat. So head over to Weavers Department Store and check out all the fun stuff. Two Chairs No Waiting is also brought to you with donations from listeners just like you. The executive producer of this episode, number 614, are the patrons at Patreon that help support me. So thank you, patrons. There are several of you, and I'm not going to mention you by name, but if you'd like to be a patron, by all means do that, and we'll tell you more at the end of the show if I remember. Hello, everybody. I'm Alan Newsom, your host for Two Chairs No Waiting, and it is the beginning of a brand new year here in Mayberry. We've made it through the year 2020, and now we're heading into 2021, and we got Mayberry events coming, and there's all kinds of fun stuff happening throughout the year. So if you want to find out about some of those things, you can go to imayberry.com/events calendar. If you go to the events calendar there, it's not really a slash, just go to imayberry.com and then look at the events calendar. You'll see a link over on the side of the page. Go there and it'll give you all kinds of information about events as they start to occur. Now, it doesn't really matter what year it is or when you're listening to this. That's always true. So head over to imayberry.com and then go to the event calendar. You'll see it there on the page right there. It's easy to spot, and it'll give you all that information about how you can join in and have fun at these events. We've got a neat report for you tonight, and this is from 2006. We're going all the way back to 2006 when Otis got to meet Gomer. And it wasn't just Otis, so I'll throw in more information, but I found a neat story about my buddy Ken Junkin that was in the Tuscaloosa News back in 2006. And we're going to hit that tonight and just have fun with that. And then we're going to hear from Randy Turner with This Week in Mayberry History. So I'm going to give us a little background music because I'm going to be doing a lot of reading. And that just adds to the fun, I think, having a little bit of music back there. Folks, this is from the Tuscaloosa News. And the year was 2006. 2006 in the Tuscaloosa News. And wow, there was a great big picture of Otis right at the top of this story. This is Ken Junkin. He's dressed up as Otis, and he's standing in front of a 1960 Ford Galaxy, painted up to look like the Mayberry squad car. And he was getting ready to do a show that we were going to be doing later that same year, that same time. So this was in March of 2006, and it says this. It says, home doesn't have to stop at the walls that surround you. Some enjoy fantasy home where everyone loves one another, where most problems are solved in, 24 minutes with quiet reason, simple caring, and maybe a song on the front porch rocker. Jim Nabors will be coming home next month. So this was in March of 2016. So Jim was coming home the next month in April in celebration of that fantasy of idyllic life. Will come to Tuscaloosa for a few hours in a Mayberry Variety Show. The Sylacauga native will be in Tuscaloosa visiting with the old Delta Tau Delta fraternity brothers from his University of Alabama days, but mainly to be inducted into the Alabama Stage and Screen Hall of Fame. His fellow inductees for 2006 are Rick Bernstein, the executive producer and senior vice president of HBO Sports. He said, this is a quote, I knew Jim Nabors was going to be a big draw, end quote, said Paul K. Looney, executive director of the ASSHOF, that's the Alabama Stage and Screen Hall of Fame. I don't think I'm going to say those initials. I think I'm going to say it out every time I see ASSHOF. I'm not going to say any way whatsoever that might. I think I would just say Alabama Stage and Screen Hall of Fame. All right. There's going to be a black tie gala on April 22nd back in 2006. Remember, this is a history report to some degree. That included, I'll try to change the tense, it included music and food and dance and stand-up comedy routine. Going to have Gomer Pyle co-stars, Ronnie Shell, played by Duke Slater, with the assistance of Gordo native Kenneth Junkin, who has worked as Mayberry events as an impersonator of Otis, the town's lovable drunk. We just don't say it out like that usually. Anyway, Looney is putting together a show to include both Andy Griffith's show and Gomer Pyle cast members, along with the Mayberry loving tribute artist. Tickets for the show were $25, and they also had an April 21st Blue Jeans party that was going to be held on the Humphrey Center at Shelton campus, with room for about 1,500 people. So evidently you can go to that. I don't remember getting to go to that. Anyway, here we go. Here's a quote from Kenneth. He said, "We do these variety shows all over the nation," Junkin said, with the tribute artist serving in support of the show's stars. Once word started getting out about the idea, the first such large Mayberry gathering since the death of Don Barney Five Knots in February the 24th of that year, the stars started to align. "These people really do like one another," Looney said. "Any opportunity to get together, and they love it." Among those performing will be Ronnie Shell, the Dillards Bluegrass Band on the Andy Griffith Show. They were the Darlings. Maggie Peterson, Charlene Darling, was there. Elizabeth McRae, Gomer's girlfriend, Lou Ann Poovey, Gomer, and Barbara Stewart, who played Sergeant Carter's girlfriend, Miss Bunny. David Browning, who has made more than 5,000 appearances as Barney Fife, the Mayberry deputy, will MC the show with Junkin and his fellow tribute artists as Opie, Floyd, Howard Sprague, and others mingling in the crowd. And it says, in the story, it actually says Howard T. Sprague. I think they thought Howard was Ernest T. I'm not sure. Anyway, going on to the story, it's a rare opportunity for a lot of us to see Jim and to be around him for a day, said David Browning, a Virginia actor who began playing the Mayberry deputy full-time in 1994 after getting the approval from Don Knotts. Even after all his years wearing the khaki, this will be Browning's first chance to interact with a former Gomer. The singer and actor best known as Gomer Pyle, the character originated on the Andy Griffith Show as the gas pump jockey, spun off into his own hit TV series as a bumbling Marine in Gomer Pyle USMC. Cut back on the travel in the 90s due to an illness, preferring to stay mostly close to his Hawaii home. Nabors has not done Mayberry reunion shows in the past, David Browning said. Knott's recent death is bound to be on Mayberry loving fans' minds, as it will likely be on Nabors, Browning said. Quote, "I want him to know that my role is not about being Don Knotts, but about being a bridge from what they did in the 60s till today," Browning said. That's the image Knotts conferred on Browning. Having first seen the actor do Barney at a 1991 Mayberry reunion show in Nashville. On the second day of the event, Don Knotts' wife, Francie, who was then his assistant, came up and told Browning that Knotts wanted to talk with him. He thought, "Oh boy, I'm in trouble," said David. Instead, Knotts wondered if the younger Barney had a stand-up comedy act. Browning's background in improvisational and vaudevillian theater keeps him on his toes while mingling with live audiences, but he didn't have a stand-up act. And when Knotts came down to the coast again in 1994, performing a live tour with some older comedy bits he had worked up for the Steve Allen Show and others, he asked Browning to open the show for him. Afterwards, Knotts told Browning, "You're doing a lot for the memory of the show." With that inspiration, he was soon working as Barney full-time, talking about David Browning. Quote, "Audiences don't care that I'm not Don Knotts," he said. "They just appreciate that I'm bringing Mayberry into the room." That dream of Mayberry brought Junkin into the fold as well, Kenneth. At first, through the Andy Griffith Show Rerun Watchers Club, which is a website, a newsletter, and more than 1,200 chapters in the United States and 3 of them in Tuscaloosa alone. Here's a quote from Kenneth. He said, "The thing about watching the show, you can kind of go there, to Mayberry," Junkin said. "I've often wanted to jump through the television and be there and go down to Wally's and have a bottle of pop, go on patrol with Andy and Barney." While volunteering at Mayberry Union, Browning urged Junkin to adopt an Otis look. Quote, "So I had me a special 56 long seersucker coat made up in Mount Airy," said to be Andy Griffith's inspiration for Mayberry. Is what Junkin said. Add to that a straw Panama hat and voila. When you're standing around as Otis, you get swarmed by people. It's not Kenneth Junkin, he said. It's part of Mayberry they're seeing. After the performance, the citizens of Mayberry will be around to sign autographs. And what a memory that was, too. We had an amazing night there doing things with the different cast members. There was an Ernest T. with us, Jim Nabors. Actually, the night we actually did the show, there's a Mayberry show the day before he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. He was sitting out in the audience watching the Mayberry show. And what was really neat for me was David was the MC, but because of the way it worked out when we got to the intermission time frame, David had been doing a different routine or a different skit and had to leave the stage right after it. So I got to introduce the intermission. And as part of that, since Mr. Nabors was sitting in the crowd, we knew during intermission that the crowd would have just flocked all around him. So we told everybody we're going to take an intermission, and we asked, "Mr. Nabors, would you like to come up on stage?" and just waved to everybody. So we brought him up on stage to get him out of the crowd. And because I was the one that got to bring him up on the stage, I got to shake his hand and everything on stage. Oh, it was big. I had met him once before, and you can hear the interview. It's in one of the I can't remember now. It's one of the episodes of Two Chairs No Waiting where I interviewed Mr. Nabors. It was one of the very first interviews I ever did, and it's one of the inspirations for starting this podcast all those years ago. So this 2006 event in Tuscaloosa, Alabama was absolutely great. We had Opie and Goober and Floyd and Howard and Ernest T. And we even had Flora from over at the gas station. She was there with us. And man, what a great night it was. Just visiting and just reliving a little bit of Mayberry, because you just can't ever do too much visiting in Mayberry, and we were so lucky to get to do that. So congratulations to Ken Junkin and David Browning in the story. They were definitely a big part of it. The Dillards were at this event. It was the Darling Boys themselves. It was Doug and Rodney, and then their band. Mostly Rodney's band that was there with us. But definitely check out imayberry.com and look for the different events that are going on, so that you get a chance to come to some of these Mayberry events. It just always hurts me that I know that you're a fan. You wouldn't be listening to this if you weren't, and you didn't know possibly about this event. Maybe you were around at the time, but you didn't know about it. But that's because you didn't know about the imayberry.com site and about the about the fact you can look on there and see about Mayberry events that are occurring all over basically in the Southeast, but in other places as well, like in Danville, Indiana, and places. So definitely check those out. Don't miss these things. A lot of these actors are no longer with us. Jim's not with us. Doug Dillard is not with us any longer. It's just, it is a amazing set of memories. While we're sad they're gone, I promise you, there are memories that are just cherished. And I just hope sometimes when I'm telling you these stories and telling you about some of these things, that you get just a little bit of a feel. If you're watching the video version, I'm showing pictures from that night when we were actually doing our Mayberry show right there on the stage with Jim Nabors watching us and Ronnie Shell and Elizabeth McCrae and Barbara Stewart all on the stage with us, along with the Dillards and Maggie Peterson. What a blessing it has been in my life to be able to be a part of these memories. And I hope you get memories like this too. I hope you can share in just the joy and that you can get out of just going to one of these Mayberry events and I don't know, getting some memories of yourself. And if you can't go, keep listening to the podcast, because I try my best to help you at least feel what it was like as a fan, because I'm a fan just like you. As a fan, being at one of these events and being able to interact with these wonderful, wonderful actors and cannot believe that an engineer from Huntsville, Alabama, that grew up in Henniger, Alabama, is getting to share the stage with some of the people like this: Jim Nabors, Ronnie Shell, Elizabeth McCrae, Barbara Stewart, the Dillards, Maggie Peterson, and then of course my fellow tribute artist. What a blessing they have all been in my life. Anyway, so that's enough, I guess, me slobbering sob story about all this stuff. So I definitely want to encourage you to come out and be with us and enjoy yourself. I know you would. So friends, now we got a report from Randy Turner with This Week in Mayberry History.
Welcome to This Week in Mayberry History, a report by special correspondent Randy Turner of the Gomer and Pyle Comic Book Literary Guild of the Mayberry Historical Society.
As we discussed last time, Frank Ferguson had an extremely busy career before first appearing in Mayberry. He had been in well over 200 movies by 1960, when he made his first appearance in The Andy Griffith Show. He had also been in many TV series, including several recurring roles. Frank also appeared in many westerns throughout his career, including 6 times in Maverick, 5 in Tales of Wells Fargo, and multiple appearances in Cheyenne, Death Valley Days, Wagon Train, Bonanza, and more. He also played recurring character Judge Gurney in half a dozen episodes of the Western series Temple Houston, based loosely on the real-life frontier lawyer. Frank also appeared in many non-Western dramas, such as Perry Mason and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. He was no less busy in comedies, appearing in The Real McCoys, McHale's Navy, Leave It to Beaver, and The Danny Thomas Show. As discussed last week, in 1960, Frank appeared in The New Housekeeper in the first scene of the first episode of The Andy Griffith Show as Wilbur Pine, who was marrying Rose, Andy and Opie's former housekeeper. Later that same season, Frank played a recurring character, Sam Lindsay, who was a store owner who objected to Ellie running for election in Ellie for Council. It may have been a hardware store that Sam owned, but regardless, it definitely stocked peat moss, which Sam's daughter Barbara Sue brought by Andy's house in the beauty contest. Before Frank returned to Mayberry, he appeared in the 1961 film Pocket Full of Miracles, in which Sheldon Leonard appeared in his capacity as an actor. Frank was also in the popular 1964 psychological horror film Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte. In 1964, toward the end of the 4th season, Frank returned to Mayberry as a second recurring character, the kind grocer Mr. Foley in Bargain Day. While he played a great many recurring characters, The Andy Griffith Show was the only series in which he played two of them in the same series. That same year, 1964, he also appeared for the first time as another recurring character, Dr. Barton Stewart in Petticoat Junction. And also in 1964, Frank began playing the other role for which he is best remembered, the first having been as the farmhand Gus in My Friend Flicka. Frank was cast in the new and quickly popular prime-time soap opera Peyton Place. Frank played Eli Carson in 179 episodes of the show between 1964 and 1969. After joining Peyton Place, Frank appeared in a 1965 episode of the TV version of Andy Griffith's film hit No Time for Sergeants. The TV version did not last, especially since it was aired in the same time slot as The Andy Griffith Show. And that same year, Frank returned to Mayberry, once again playing Mr. Foley, who returned toward the end of the fifth season in The Case of the Punch in the Nose. Frank's role in Peyton Place kept him busy during the latter half of the 1960s. In addition to his return to The Andy Griffith Show, Frank also managed to squeeze in appearing in a 1965 episode of Bonanza and a role in a 1965 TV movie based on General Custer titled The Great Sioux Massacre. And after having already first appeared as the recurring character Dr. Barton Stewart in Petticoat Junction in 1964, he played the character 5 more times in 1965. By the time Peyton Place went off the air in 1969, Frank was 69 years old. As he entered his 70s, in the decade of the 1970s, he slowed down his acting schedule considerably, though he was still very much an active performer. In 1970, Frank made his final appearance in Petticoat Junction, though as a different character than he had played 6 times previously. He also appeared in 2 episodes of Green Acres as different characters. In 1971, Frank made his final appearance in Lassie, though again not as the recurring character he had previously played. Beginning in 1972, Frank reprised his role as Eli Carson and returned to Peyton Place, a daytime version of the soap opera that did not prove as popular as the original primetime version. Frank appeared in other series during this decade as well, including Land of the Giants, Nanny and the Professor, and Adam 12. In 1974, Frank appeared in an episode of Kung Fu, and in 1976, the aging actor had roles in episodes of The Waltons, How the West Was Won, and Little House on the Prairie. After Frank's role in Little House, he retired from acting, and Frank passed away 2 years later from cancer at the age of 71. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thanks for listening, and remember to take care of yourselves, watch out for one another, and take Andy's advice and go out there and act like somebody.
Wow, thank you, Randy. Randy is always coming up with amazing stuff about the Andy Griffith Show. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of what he's doing online, send him an email at turnersgrade@gmail.com, turnersgrade@gmail.com, and he'll make sure you don't miss out on any of the fun that he is creating around the Andy Griffith Show. Folks, it is always a pleasure to be here with you. The episode number where I'd interviewed Jim Nabors was episode number 281, Jim Nabors interview. That was up in Pigeon Forge. It was actually in Sevierville, possibly, but at the theater there, I had to arrange and had to send in the questions before I went, and got to go backstage after a rehearsal and interview Mr. Nabors. He was a very, very nice guy. And so if you'd like to hear that interview, you can go back to episode number 281 and check that out. Thanks to the chat room, Josh and Mandy, they looked it up for me. So one of the things I always worry about, I enjoy telling stories. I enjoyed that memory from 2006 because it was such a neat event and so fun to be there. I love to tell stories about these events that we did and have seen. And I just always want you to realize I love telling them because I am just like you. I'm a fan of the Andy Griffith Show. I'm a huge fan that somehow was able to become the Floyd the Barber guy, maybe because nobody else is crazy enough to dress up like a barber and go around and go, hey, how you doing? And most people don't want to do that. And I was crazy enough to do it. But I have had such a fortunate, blessed experience being able to meet these wonderful people. And I hope it always comes across that that's what I'm trying to get you to be able to share my feelings and what I felt and what I have felt getting to meet these folks and to do these wonderful events with them and to be Floyd to their, whatever character, and to just be on stage and to watch you out in the audience laughing and having a good time. What a blessing it has been to be just in any way associated with the show at all. And I love it. And I hope it all comes through when I'm talking about it. Hopefully it does. I know at least some of you realize how much I just love the show. It's just been such a blessing. I mean, you can be a fan of a lot of things, right? I like Star Trek. I like Star Wars. I like Superman. I like, there's a lot of things. But I've never met any of those people or get to spend any time with them. So it's been a very blessed thing. I really feel like the Lord's just kind of led me through it somehow. And I'm so glad to be able to share it with you. I hope it comes across that I'm just sharing it with you. I'm not trying to if you didn't get to go to these events, I'm not trying to rub your nose in it. I'm trying to bring you along there with me. And wow, we got a year here. We got a brand new year starting off, and we're going to just make it a Mayberry year and have a lot of fun as we go forward and spend time visiting with one another, spend time with your family. I know you've been stuck at home with some people probably, but hopefully you'll be able to spend more time with your family this year, sitting out on the front porch, outside where it's safe. Isn't that what Andy and Opie and Aunt B did? They sat around outside all the time. So maybe we're getting back to a little bit simpler things here on some of this. So, folks, I want to thank you for joining me here. I hope you enjoyed tonight's podcast. Thank you, Randy Turner, for his wonderful report. And I would love to hear from you. Give me a call at 888-684-8415, or you can email me at floyd@imayberry.com. If you can't remember that, just head over to TCNW.com. You'll be able to find it there. Plus, you'll be able to find all 613 previous episodes of this podcast, which you can go and surely find something to enjoy. So go back and check it out and have a good time. And we'll see you next time right here